Committee will come to order. Good morning and welcome to the Subcommittee Markup for Fiscal Year 2015 Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Bill. I want to thank our colleagues, especially Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy, for joining us today. Before we get into the details of the bill, I want to take a moment to pay tribute to my good friend, our Ranking Member, and this subcommittee's former Chairman, Jim Moran. Mr. Moran will be leaving Congress at the end of this year, having served Northern Virginia and his constituents for 24 years. We all admire Jim for his passion and commitment to the issues he cares deeply about. We don't agree on every issue, but we're good friends and will continue to be good friends. Jim, we're all grateful to you and for your service, and we salute you. Now you got to be nice to me for the rest of the meeting.
That takes care of that. I can't say an unkind word now. That's all bold.
That's really tough for you.
I also want to thank each of our subcommittee members for their active participation in our hearing process this year and the bipartisan spirit that continues to be a hallmark of our subcommittee deliberations. This fiscal year 2015 Interior and Environment Bill is funded at $30.22 billion, which is $162 million or 0.5% above the FY14 enacted level, and $409 million or 1% below the budget request. The subcommittee has made a sincere effort to prioritize critical needs throughout the bill within its 302B allocation. As you know, we face some serious challenges. In 8 of the last 10 years, the Forest Service and the Department of Interior have exceeded their wildland fire suppression budgets despite being fully funded at the 10-year suppression average for such costs. Fire seasons have grown longer, more destructive, putting people, communities, and ecosystems at greater risk. Fire borrowing has now become a routine thing rather than just extraordinary. This is a major challenge that Congress must soon address. In the meantime, however, the committee has provided robust wildland fire funding in its fiscal year 2015 bill. Fire suppression accounts, including the Flame Reserve Fund, are again fully funded at the 10-year average level. The committee also provided $470 million to address the Forest Service's projected shortfall in fire suppression funding for fiscal year 2014. Hazardous fuel funding is increased by $90 million over the enacted fiscal year of 2014 level. And the committee has provided the Forest Service funding for the next two generation aircraft to efficiently and safely fight wildfires and replace the Korean War-era aircraft we presently have. This bill also makes critical investments in Indian country, a priority shared by the bipartisan members of this subcommittee. Overall, funding for the Bureaus of Indian Affairs and Education and the Indian Health Service is increased by 5% from fiscal year 2014 levels, the largest percentage increase in this bill. The bill fully funds contract support costs and tribal grant school support costs, provides funding to staff newly constructed health facilities, addresses the rising cost of medical inflation, and fully funds the construction of 3 remaining schools on the Bureau of Indian Education school replacement construction list. The bill also provides full funding in fiscal year 2015 for the payments in lieu and taxes, or PILT. PILT payments are made to 49 of the 50 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. The bill also provides for $2.27 billion for the operation of our national parks, including $40 million in requested funding related to the Centennial and National Park Service. We also attempted to address a number of concerns within the Fish and Wildlife Service accounts. The bill funds popular grant programs at fiscal year 2014 enacted levels. It also provides additional funds to combat international wildfire trafficking, protects fish hatcheries and cuts and closures, continues funding for evasive mussels and Asian carp. The bill also provides $152 million for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Programs that enjoy broad bipartisan support. Some members would prefer more funding, others would prefer less for LWCF. We have attempted to forge a middle ground in this bill. Overall funding for the EPA is reduced by $1,717 million or 9% from fiscal year 2014 enacted levels. However, members of the subcommittee will be pleased to know that the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is funded at fiscal year 2014 enacted level of $300 million. Again, this year, there is a great deal of concern over the number of regulatory actions being pursued by the Environmental Protection Agency in the absence of legislation without clear congressional direction. For this reason, the bill includes a number of provisions to address some of these concerns and to stop unnecessary and damaging regulatory overreach by the agency. Before closing, I'd like to make one further point about several endangered species provisions in this bill. This subcommittee has no interest in forcing any species to go extinct. What we're concerned about is federal regulatory action based more on arbitrary legal deadlines than common sense. Nowhere is this more evident than with the sage-grouse. States are rightfully concerned that a federal takeover of sage-grouse will jeopardize existing conservation partnerships with states and private landowners, which are necessary to save the sage-grouse. This takeover would eliminate jobs, curtail future job growth, devastate state and local economies, and undermine the nation's ability to develop conventional and renewable resources necessary for energy independence. So long as sage-grouse are not under imminent threat of extinction, cooperative conservation must be given a chance to work. That is why this bill includes a one-year delay on any decision to list sage-grouse, along with a strong cross-cutting budget to help implement these collaborative conservation plans. This markup is the beginning of a long process. I hope over the coming months we'll come together, as we usually do, to find common ground. And in that spirit, I look forward to continuing to work with Mr. Moran and the members of this subcommittee. I am now happy to yield to Mr. Moran for any opening remarks he would like to make. Jim?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for those nice words, Ken. I do want to start off by saying what a great job that you have done since assuming the chair from our mutual good friend and former chair, Mike Simpson, who I know I have also had a superb working relationship and a good, close personal friendship. And thanks for letting me go ahead of you last night out of the garage. That was you, wasn't it? Yeah, I was wondering, who's so nice? You
are most for retiring members.
Oh, thanks so much. I have also enjoyed the cooperation, the collaboration, the openness and transparency that you and the subcommittee staff have shown, Mr. Chairman. David and Darren and Jason and Rochelle, Colin, Jackie, and not to mention the Democratic staff, Rick and Shalond, and my own personal staff person, Tim Aiken. Because the staff, as we all know, does so much of the work. And this is under the circumstances, under severe budget constraints, this is good work. We have together addressed some of the most important issues facing not only our nation but our planet. So you have carried out your duties as chairman, Mr. Calvert, in an open and collaborative manner, and for that we are truly appreciative, and we say that sincerely. It has been my privilege to serve on the subcommittee now for about 20 years. I was honored to serve as chairman, and for the last 4 years as the ranking member. It's a very important subcommittee. Literally, the very quality of the air we breathe and the water that we drink depends on the programs that are funded by this bill. And that is why I'm disappointed that with the budgets that have been set for the past several years by the Budget Committee, which sometime we have to revisit why we need those guys. But anyways, we've just tied ourselves up in a financial straitjacket that doesn't allow us to meet the needs of today, let alone lay an appropriate foundation for the future. There's an old Native American proverb that says, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors as much as we borrow it from our children." We owe it to generations to come to leave this earth at least as clean and green as we find it today. And this bill is the means, in large part, by how the federal government goes about doing that. My concern is that with many areas of this bill, we're just treading water. In other words, we're falling behind on investments in our natural resources. 4 years ago, when I was privileged to chair this bill, the total bill was funded at $32 billion. It's and we've had inflation. We've had ever more serious issues to address. Some of them brought about by the frequency and severity of weather conditions. The challenges have grown, but the money has decreased. It's not your fault. It's not Mr. Simpson's fault. But I do question, and I'd have to say I question how much of a priority the administration has made these programs vis-a-vis other responsibilities in the federal budget. But the fact is that this funding level represents a substantial disinvestment in protecting our country's natural resources. So I recognize the difficulties that you faced in crafting the bill. At first glance, you would think that the subcommittee's 302B allocation of $30 billion, $220 million, again, a full $2 billion less than where it was funded 4 years ago, it does seem to be higher than last year. But when you factor in increased firefighting costs and the majority's decision to fund the payment in lieu of taxes, the so-called PILT account, from discretionary appropriations, means we're left with less funds overall to fund the many important agencies and programs in the bill. Now, the President's supplemental that we just received, and it includes $615 million, does help, and I'll get into that in a moment. But the result of the overall severe funding levels means that important programs like the Land and Water Conservation Fund are badly underfunded, and many other programs and agencies are at best flat funded. Now, the most significant cuts in the bill center on the Environmental Protection Agency, and I recognize that certain members, Mr. Chairman, there is a level of frustration with the management of the agency, but I'm deeply concerned that the magnitude of the cuts and their continuation year after year weaken the very foundations of the agency and the important programs that it administers. And it's not about these daily frustrations. It's about the mission of EPA that needs to go on, and I think needs to be more robustly funded. It's time to stop thinking of EPA accounts as particularly like this, the Safe Drinking Water and the wastewater infrastructure revolving funds, as just an easy pool of money for other agencies and programs in the bill to be funded. Now, your mark, Mr. Chairman, does include robust funding for wildland fire, and it's $470 million to pre-fund the expected shortfall in FY14 fire costs. But already that funding is out of date, as the latest estimate of the FY14 shortfall, as contained in the administration supplemental request that was sent up yesterday, is $615 million. Without some relief from fire costs, as was proposed by our colleague, Mr. Simpson, and it was endorsed by the administration. Now, I have to say, Mr. Healy put this description in. Fire is going to burn a hole in the Interior and Environment budget. If we hadn't done it, I know Mike or you would have done it. But it's not a laughing matter. Wildland fires should be funded as emergency funding, like we do floods, because it's out of our control, and so should be funded accordingly. Now, while I recognize the political pressure that the majority faced to fund PILT in this bill, I think that too was a mistake. If state and local governments believe that PILT is an entitlement, it should be funded from mandatory spending, as was the case for the past 6 years, rather than from discretionary appropriations where it crowds out funding for other high-priority needs. Now, this is going to be the most difficult part of the bill. There are 23 problem legislative riders and funding limitations that are included in your mark, Mr. Chairman, and 5 of those are new from last year. We thought when we had 30-something, we'd covered the whole gamut, but there are 5 new ones now. This authorizing legislation, Mr. Chairman of the full committee, these kinds of authorizations on an appropriations bill, and I know you would agree, do not belong in this bill. And their effect, of course, is to undermine important environmental laws, threaten public health and safety, and deny the impact that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions have on our planet. One bright spot in this bill is the bipartisan support and funding for Native American programs. To the best of our ability, we are trying to meet our obligations to Native Americans with an emphasis on education and social services, including funding to carry out the Violence Against Women Act. And that is very much appreciated. And I know that's the case on both sides of the aisle. As I say, it's bipartisan priority. So, Mr. Chairman, as much as I appreciate the process that was used in developing this bill, I can't support the product at this time. I recognize that today is just the first step in a long process towards enactment, and I intend to continue working with you and other members to seek improvements to the bill so then, in the end, we can have a final legislative product that does have bipartisan support. And again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I thank you for your comments. Now I'm happy to recognize the distinguished chairman of the full committee, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the time. I'll be hopefully brief. This is sort of a bittersweet time on the subcommittee. We're losing to retirement one of the great champions of the causes of this subcommittee. I don't always agree with him on issues, but I do respect and admire him and count him as a close friend. We have a good time together. So, Mr. Brand, we wish you Godspeed in your next chapter.
That means a lot. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And, of course, this is the maiden voyage of the new chairman of the subcommittee. Mr. Calvert is, I think, brought up a really good bill. This is a tough bill to write because of the substance of the agencies involved. But I think you've done a great job, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you and Mr. Moran and the staff and all the members for the great work. And, of course, Mr. Simpson still sits among us on the subcommittee, having served as our chairman, now having moved to another great subcommittee chair, Energy and Water, who's on the floor today. This is the 11th of the 12 appropriations bills. We've not seen this kind of regular order in a long time, and I want to congratulate this subcommittee for bringing out this bill. On the floor today, we have the Energy and Water bill, which will be the 6th bill of the 12 on the floor to pass the floor, and I hope by today or tomorrow we can say that bill has become the 6th. That's halfway through, and at this time of the year, that's really special, and it's due to the hard work of all the members of our committee. This bill, at $30.22 billion, is critical. It's a critical bill since it deals so much with our nation's land management, our energy security, and ultimately jobs. With this bill and with the Energy and Water bill that's on the floor today, I'm proud that we are standing up on this committee for these jobs and against an administration which at every turn has tried to find new regulations that will hamper economic activity. This bill also ensures that the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program is extended for 1 year and that our fire suppression accounts within the Department of Interior and Forest Service are fully funded. And we ensure that our obligations to our native tribes are met with increased funding for the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Education, as well as the Indian Health Service. In the last 5 years, we've seen attempts, after attempts, to add layers of environmental red tape to any economic development that our states, counties, and cities want to undertake, such as the new, quote, Waters of the United States, quote, proposal, in which the EPA seeks to gain jurisdiction over most of the country by claiming authority to regulate dry beds, ditches, and anywhere water once ran or conceivably could run. In the last month, we have also seen the EPA release new standards for greenhouse gas emissions at existing power plants, which is an equally fruitless attempt to legislate through regulation. Despite the promise that President Obama made in 2008 that under his plan electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket, and the EPA's own analysis that this rule would raise electricity rates by more than 6% in the next decade, bureaucrats in Washington have been crowing that these new rules would somehow lower energy costs. How can this be? The answer is simple. They chose to only analyze the scenario that best fit their case. They assume that states will implement demand-side energy efficiency programs, which is bureaucratese for regulating how much energy you use and what kind of appliances you may buy and use. They did not analyze any scenarios where such regulations may not be enacted by states, either because they could be costly to implement or politically unpalatable. Instead, they would like us to believe that these new regulations will have no impact on the economy, when we know the opposite is true. More expensive and less reliable sources of fuel will drive up manufacturing costs, add more coal miners to the unemployment lines, and stretch family budgets to their limit, if not beyond. In essence, the EPA is trying to assure that if you like your air conditioner, you can keep it. But we've heard promises like that before, it seems to me. The Congress must exercise its prerogative to prevent this kind of bureaucratic overreach that would be crippling for the U.S. economy. And I'm proud that we are exercising that prerogative here in this bill. I'm proud that we continue to uphold our commitment to the American people, to move our bills through regular order at a quick pace. This is a good bill. It deserves the support of each of the members of the subcommittee and the full Congress. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I thank the chairman. I'm now happy to yield to the distinguished ranking member of the full committee, Mrs. Lowy.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member Moran and our outstanding staff for your work on this bill. Chairman Calvert, congratulations on introducing your first bill and following the committee tradition of consulting the minority, even if the outcome is not something we can support at this time. And since this is the last Interior and Environment Subcommittee markup for Mr. Moran, we're really sorry to see you go. We will miss your quiet demeanor, your cool, calm approach to these issues. We know you have been a really extraordinary stalwart for the environment, and in all seriousness, you never doubt where Mr. Moran stands on these issues, and we appreciate your commitment, your hard work, and really wish you lots of good luck. And I know the future will be bright as you continue to express your views. We look forward to continuing to interact with you, and I thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Of the 11 FY15 bills that have been released, this is perhaps the worst. Even though the allocation, $162 million more, with all great respect for the chair, even though the allocation, $162 million more than the current level, was sufficient to produce a legitimate bill, the majority squandered these additional resources. The dramatic $717 million cut to the Environment Protection Agency would endanger the health and safety of many communities in the name of protecting the bottom line of industries, many of which already benefit from corporate loopholes that put a heavier burden on middle-class taxpayers. For years, this subcommittee has lamented the growing cost of fighting wildfires that crowds out other priorities. The former chairman of this subcommittee has introduced a bill to remove some emergency wildfire costs from this bill and make them eligible for funding under the disaster budget cap. His bill is bipartisan. It is co-sponsored by 99 members, including many from this committee. Yet, wildfire costs in this bill, without an emergency designation, even though most on our committee believe fires are no less an emergency than hurricanes and tornadoes. The majority also funds the PILT program in this year's bill. For the first time since 2008, these payments in lieu of taxes have been mandatory spending since then to ensure that counties receive 100% of the authorized payment, which they weren't receiving when it was last in our bill. Redesignating PILT as discretionary spending creates another funding shortfall in the bill and compromises our ability to better protect the environment and public health. As a result, acquisition and assistance programs under the Land and Water Conservation Fund are cut by nearly 50%. The Heritage Area Partnership Program by nearly 50%, which happens to include the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area in my district, and water infrastructure revolving loan funds by nearly 25%. And while the President's request for additional resources for oil and gas inspections is included, it takes the funds from other interior programs instead of making oil and gas companies pay for it out of their billions in profits. In particular, I'm strongly opposed to a number of legislative riders, which amount to an industry wish list of giveaways. For instance, there are two special provisions that enable mining companies to avoid cleaning up pollutants, leaving taxpayers on the hook. I thought we're all sensitive to taxpayers and their rising costs. This just leaves the taxpayers to pay. Doesn't make any sense. Once again, ranchers, along with oil and gas companies, get their wish to prevent the listing of the sage grouse on the endangered species list. And in a demonstration of solidarity with climate change deniers and the coal industry, the majority prevents the administration from advancing new rules to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Lastly, while I am appreciative the chairman maintained level funding for important geographic programs like the Long Island Sound, some of the increased resources in this bill should be used to better support these initiatives which do such important work in so many of our districts. So let me say, Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate the cooperation you have shown, and I really look forward to improving this bill as it progresses through the Congress, and I thank you.
I thank the gentlelady. With that, are there any other members of the subcommittee who would like to be heard on this bill today? Mr. Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, if I could for just a second, while I wouldn't say anything normally, I would like to take just a second to thank you and Mr. Moran, but particularly thank Mr. Moran for his service on this committee. And I thank you for your kind words. I'm going to miss your quotes of the day. but one of the highest honors anybody can say about anybody is that they're friends. So I appreciate your comments in that regard, and I've always considered you a good friend, even though it's kind of interesting. He comes from Alexandria, Virginia, and I come from Idaho Falls, Idaho, a pretty rural area. We have different experiences, and so consequently a lot of the programs in here affect us differently. But one thing I can say about Jim is that he has always listened and tried to understand the impact some of these programs have on those of us in the West and other things, as I've tried to learn how some of these programs affect the more populous eastern part of this country. And we've had a great working relationship, and Congress is going to miss you, Jim. So I thank you for your service. You did mention two things, though, that I would like to just comment on, and it's been mentioned by, I think, everyone, and that is the wildfire fighting costs. I want to thank everybody on this subcommittee for supporting this legislation to try to designate a certain portion of the wildfire fighting costs as emergency costs, and we've got to do that if we're going to actually reduce the cost of wildfires in the long run. It makes no sense to be taking money out of fighting, out of reducing the hazardous fuels and so forth, just to fight wildfires instead of reducing the risk in the future. So hopefully we'll be able to get that bill through Congress, which will have an impact on this appropriation bill, and the other one is the PILT and LWCF. I think everyone on this subcommittee would agree that we would like to see PILT as mandatory funding and not discretionary spending within this bill. Unfortunately, we haven't come up yet with a way to pay for it, but we've been trying to marry up PILT and LWCF, because I think that ought to be on the mandatory side too, and I'd like to see those two married together somehow, and I know there are organizations out there working on a way to try to accomplish that, which would be very, very beneficial to this subcommittee and this appropriation. But Mr. Chairman, you've done a wonderful job in putting this bill together. There is one thing I would like to say also, and that is, I don't know if you were going to say it, I suspect you were, but we're losing one of the best people that we've ever had, that I've ever worked with in the administration, and Pam Hayes, who is here with us, has been at the Department of Interior for a number of years, and when she's going to be leaving, retiring in August, and I just told her that I'm glad that you're chairman of this subcommittee if she's leaving instead of me, because she's been vital to not only, she's been vital not only to the members of the subcommittee, but also to the staff, and we have a great staff that do a great job on both sides of the aisle on this subcommittee, so thank you, Pam, for all that you've done.
You're here.
It's a bipartisan moment. We're all going to miss Pam.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other comments? Yes, Betty.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I truly appreciate the work you have done on this bill and all the committee staff have done in crafting the bill together. And because, as you know, that this bill falls short of some expectations, I felt compelled to let you know that publicly before we move on any farther in this procedure. And to Ranking Member Moran, you're going to be missed, but I don't think you're ever going to be forgotten here. So thank you so much. And the Interior and Environment Appropriations Bill isn't always the easiest place to find common ground, as has been pointed out in some of the discussion around here. But after last year's bill, this exceeded my expectations in many, many areas. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. But as been pointed out, there are some real areas of bipartisanship achievement here, and I'm very proud to be a member of this committee along with Mr. Cole. The increased funding for both the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Indian Health Services reflects a solid commitment from all around this table to find positive solutions for the well-being of our Native American brothers and sisters, and that is something we can all be very proud of. And I'm also very pleased to see the strong support for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, but I think you know the numbers of the Great Lake representatives around this table too, and I'm sure you know the Great Lakes by name by now. But your commitment to fight to work together on invasive species is also appreciative, Bill. But as pointed out, this bill does unfortunately fall short. The underfunding in the NEA and the NEH is disappointing. These agencies revitalize communities and support our constituents. And to the appropriation chairman, that means cutting jobs in my district when these and around the country when we see cuts to these there. The stewardship of the environment is an essential part of the subcommittee, And as has been pointed out by several people, this bill neglects to make the necessary investments in the Environmental Protection Agency to safeguard our air, water, and land from pollution. Cutting the EPA puts human health in our communities at risk. But I do want to just take a second to talk about climate change. We know that it's real, and we cannot be making the choices between addressing climate change or fighting fires. We know that the $4 billion we're spending today on fighting wildfires will only increase if we don't invest in prevention, and that must include addressing climate change. We need to focus on the underlying causes of some of the severe weather and the extreme droughts. We have a long way to go together, but I'm confident we can find a path forward. Mr. Chairman, this was your first year in guiding this bill and Mr. Moran's last as ranking member, and I appreciate the tremendous leadership and mentorship you have both shown me. I look forward to working on this bill with you as it moves forward with our own colleagues. I'm confident we can improve this bill and make it something we can all support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I look forward to working with you as this process moves forward. Any other comments? Mr. Cole.
Thank you. First, to my dear friend, the ranking member, wait till you see Labor H. We won't have this title for long. But seriously, well, that actually was serious. Let me first, to my good friend, Mr. Moran. We serve on 3 subcommittees together, on Ledge Branch, Defense, and of course here. And since I live, when I'm up here in Alexandria, I actually feel like I spend at least as much time in his district as I do in my own. Now, I haven't always felt well represented in your district as a Republican, but I've always felt extraordinarily well represented as a Native American, and because nobody has worked harder and fought harder for people that are not directly in large numbers your constituents than you have on this committee. And, it is, as my good friend Ms. McCollum said, something that this committee can be exceptionally proud of under multiple chairmen of both parties for a number of years. And, we've, I think 4 years in a row, and I say this is no criticism to the President, we've exceeded what the administration has asked for. 4 years in a row in a time of budget difficulty. So that shows genuine bipartisan commitments. We've done it under I think extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And so that working relationship is really strong on this committee and very bipartisan, very genuine by all the members. So I will just say I'm extraordinarily appreciative, Mr. Chairman, under your leadership that's continued and that you've built on Mr. Simpson's success and Mr. Moran's success and Mr. Dick's success, and that's just become part of the culture of the committee, and that's to be commended. I want to thank the staff as well. Again, this is a staff that really works hard to be responsive. It really cooperates across the aisle, and again, does try to take the views of the members into account and work within them. I mean, the way staff should, quite frankly. It's just been an extraordinary group to work with. Last point, I want to publicly also thank our chairman, Mr. Rogers, and our ranking member, Ms. Loy. This committee was not functioning very well a few years ago. But what you two have done in the last couple of years to try and move us back toward regular order, where we could work together and produce legislation, and what you've done in a bipartisan fashion working across the rotunda with your counterparts, which we saw in the omnibus bill last year, I think is one of the most exceptional legislative achievements that I've seen here in a very difficult and politically polarized environment. And that simply couldn't happen if we didn't have 2 long-time and very skillful appropriators who respect the traditions of the committee and the process where this committee, which is a supremely practical committee, tries to address problems in a practical way. So I know you have many steps, the 2 of you in front of you, as you work these things through. And I just want you to know, and I think that I probably speak for every member of the committee, we appreciate the bipartisan professionalism that you both show, and the leadership and how you fought for this committee and helped restore this committee to a measure of its, its former glory, if you will, and hopefully you can continue, because I think as you do that, you actually change the Congress for the better as well.
So just, I want to thank both of you, not just on this bill, but again, I've seen you work on every other bill and work well together even when you disagreed. If we had more of that in the Congress of the United States and between the Congress and the administration, we'd be a lot better off. But you certainly have both done your part, and so just thank you very much. And again, Mr. Chairman, congratulations on this bill. I think it's a very good bill, given the constraints you had to work with and the competing priorities that we all bring to the table. And thank you for working so well with Mr. Moran. So it is genuinely a bipartisan product, and we'll continue to change it as we move through, but it's just well done. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo many of the things that have already been said by my colleagues and others, thanking the chair on taking over the committee and the good work that you have done with our ranking member. I want to echo everyone who said how sad it's going to be to lose Mr. Moran to the Congress. I'm sorry I didn't have the chance to spend more years with you. I feel like I came at the tail end. And certainly as a new member of this committee, you've been a great ranking member to help me better understand the issues that we have to deal with, to support me in the concerns that I've had. I think we will all miss your leadership. Ms. Lilly addressed it in a certain way, but truly you bring an enormous amount of passion and understanding and good strategic skills to the issues that I think many of the rest of us are passionate about. Know that we can't always achieve the goals that we have, but I really appreciate all that you do to help us advance so many issues here in this committee and others. And just to echo a couple of things without repeating what everybody said, I do want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for some of the increases that are in the bill on invasive species and programs addressing climate change. We haven't gone far enough, but I appreciate that we are accepting some of the things we heard in hearings this year, that there is more money devoted to the native populations, and that's also a really critical need, and I appreciate how much this committee comes together in a bipartisan way to help all of us who have districts and states where there's just not enough resources to go around, and we should be doing so much more, and this is such a knowledgeable committee on that, and I appreciate the movement forward. I'm concerned about many of the same things. People have talked a lot about the EPA, and I won't repeat, but the Forest Legacy Program, that's a huge issue to us to have cuts there in terms of long-term preservation of the forest and some of the improvement of the forest, particularly in regions like I represent, and the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowments for the Humanities. I just am very disappointed to see that we're making more cuts here. And I think too often people write these off as, arts programs are frivolous or something unimportant. And I think we all know when we read through what's in these budgets, whether it's some of the NEA art therapy work that gets done with our returning veterans at Walter Reed, other things that get set up in our own state where doctors help people who are in difficult issues. This is not only used for health care, but I can say very strongly from my state, one of the most rural states in the nation, faced with some of the problems that many of the rest of you have on declining manufacturing base, loss of blue-collar jobs, loss of jobs in the fishing industry. It has been the creative economy that has helped us to come back in many rural communities that had no other way. And many of those boosts in funding have come from the federal government, through the NEA, through the NEH. And when that's gone, we don't have those kind of resources in our state to build it back. And in these tough economic times, that's going to be a huge loss for us. But I want to thank you for working well. I look forward to working with everybody. I hope all of the things that are problems we fix along the way and find a bill that we can all support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'd like to, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, let me be brief with this. But there's something of great note in this bill that we've not talked about that needs to be publicly talked about a bit. The ability of the committee and the subcommittees to properly oversee agencies and to allocate funding for their purposes depends upon their willingness to share information with us about their budgets. To my knowledge, there's been no agency that has been more unresponsive to the inquiries of the Congress about how they're spending our dollars than the EPA. They just simply will not respond to inquiries. They don't share the information that we have to properly oversee that agency, among others, and to properly construct their funding for the next year. That's why in this bill, the agency is severely punished the funding for the Office of Congressional Affairs and for its budget office is reduced by 50%. That's because of the lack of response to the congressional inquiries, which is impeding our critical oversight. At the same time, to be sure that the people that make decisions in that agency hear, the funding for the EPA's administrative office is also reduced by 50%. This committee will not tolerate agencies that we appropriate for not giving us accurate and full information. So let the word go forth. We want info. Thank you.
So I get this mic to work. First, before I ask for any amendment, I want to thank the staff, all the staff on both sides, for the great job, many hours, a lot of member requests and input. So they did a fantastic job, and we appreciate David and all your staff for what they've done on that, again, on both the majority and the minority side. And with that, are there any amendments to the bill? Seeing none, Mr. Simpson, you're recognized for making a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
All those in favor, vote say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Could, I mean, we've achieved something of a rare kumbaya moment here with the subcommittee. So we're not going to offer any amendments. I mean, obviously, there are going to be amendments at the full committee level. But at this point, I think voice voting, this is appropriate, and even the voice vote was not a particularly vigorous one. This is as good a bill as we're concerned under all the political and fiscal circumstances as we could have gotten out of subcommittee. So I think the issues themselves are going to be fully debated, though, at the full committee level. And at this point, I mean, we'll just stick with a voice vote. We won't ask for a roll call, but we're on record as being a no voice vote.
Well, I thank the ranking member. I look forward to working with him as we move forward to next week. And the ayes have it. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the measures just approved. Let me remind the members again to leave the copies of the bill and the report in the room. And with that, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Okay.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Good job, Ken. Good work. Good job.
Great. Okay.
Thanks, Dave. Well done.